Okay. Once again, my name is Howard Eber. I am an alcoholic. I would like to welcome you all to, I believe this is week number 11 of the God Idea. This is a meeting brought to you by a cooperative effort of the Big Book Comes Alive, whose home meeting is on Sunday night at 5 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock in the UK, and the Big Book Compendium, who has several meetings throughout the week, and Rob is going to put them up in the chat during the meeting. We are in Bill's story, and I believe where we left off last week was before Ebby came to visit Bill. I think we ended with, we talked about Napoleon last time. We're on page 4, paragraph 3, and we're going to cheat a little bit today because we're going to use some aids, some visual aids from the DVD, the Bill W. DVD. But for now, let's just follow the book. We're on the bottom paragraph. Bill had, there'd been a stock market crash. Bill went from New York. He went to his friend Richard Johnson at Green Shields in Montreal, I'm sorry, where he did great for a year. And then the old Bill came back, and they had to cut him loose. So Bill could no longer hold a job. Bill's progression continues. And as I mentioned last week and the week before, I believe, as we go through this, what I'm going to suggest you do is any point that you can really identify with Bill, put a little check mark, a pencil check mark, because for 20 some odd years, I read this story and couldn't identify with any part of it because I was comparing. And I just didn't have anything in common with this guy. He was a stockbroker, a failed stockbroker, and I don't recognize the market. I don't understand the market. He was in the military, and I don't know. I'm a short, overweight, asthmatic, nearsighted Jew from New York who'd never been in any form of the armed services. To me, a bayonet was a cute cheerleader from Bayonne, New Jersey. The hell did I know about this stuff? But when I started to look for things, the way Bill thinks and the way Bill drinks and the way Bill acts, I started to realize I'm just like this guy. So as we go through that, you may want to put a check next to points that you identify with. We're also going to look for points in his progression where he goes from drinking for fun, moments sublime with intervals hilarious, till he starts to drink because it's to function, where he said it ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. And we're about to see him go over to that third part, drinking for the worst reason of all, the seeking of oblivion. We're also looking, as we go through this, for examples of Bill's quest for status, Bill's quest for money and power, this big shotism of his, because I believe that is a mind mood altering substance, and especially in Bill's case, this quest for status and recognition. So as we go through it, you may want to, what I do is I put a red check mark or a red underline next to any of those, what I call the King Bill of the Kingdom of William kind of lines. So we're going to look for those things as we go through this. So back to the book, we're on the bottom of page 4, where he had gone to Montreal, crashed and burned, came back to New York, and now look where he is. He says, we went to live with my parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. When Bill came back, a friend of his on Wall Street, a guy by the name of Joel Hirschhorn, Hirschhorn, helped him out, gave him a little bit of work. But Bill kept drinking, and when Bill drank, he was an ugly drunk. He wasn't a happy-go-lucky guy. He started fights. And so one night he got into a fight in a bar with the taxi cab driver, and the owner, Joel Hirshhorn, heard about it and had to let Bill go. But when he fired Bill, he gave him like a severance check. He gave him a check for $2,000, which in today's money would probably be, I would estimate, somewhere around $20,000. It's a nice parting gift, but Joel really liked Bill and wanted to help him. His name, once again, is Joel Hirshhorn, Hirschhorn. If you'd like to know a little bit more about Joel Hirshhorn, if you read the book Bill W., a biography of our co-founder by Frances Hartigan, pick this book up. There's mention of him on page 47. Page 47, they talk about Hartigan. They talk about, I'm sorry, Hirshhorn. But so again, Hirshhorn gives him the $2,000, and Bill goes home, gives the $2,000, and I'm shortening this story because I don't want to go through all the details, gives the $2,000 to Lois. And the next morning, what do you think happened? He asked for it back because he had an opportunity to invest in something, which we're going to get to in a moment, the famous Jersey Lightning story. And he needed that $2,000 to invest. So back to where we were reading, mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years. 5 years. And I've underlined that. And I've also underlined and hardly draw a sober breath. My wife, these are all, incidentally, indications of Bill's descent into doom. A friend of mine calls it the descent into hell, whichever way you want to term it. You're watching him go deeper and deeper into this thing. And here's one. In 5 years, he hardly drew a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, that's Macy's at that time. She was earning $19 a week. That's what she was pulling in. Coming home exhausted too, and please underline, to find me drunk. How selfish is that? Think about Bill's ego at this point too. This guy who has this enormous, insatiable appetite for fame, for recognition, and ego, and he has to now stay at his in-laws, his mother and father-in-law's home. They're going off to work because they both work. Lois goes off to work because she has to support somebody. And what does Bill do? Bill stays home, laying on the couch, drinking all day. And he doesn't just drink. He did something else. On the top of page 5, he says, I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage houses. He's no longer the knight in shining armor. He's no longer the fair-haired boy who, everyone follows to the tune of millions, that everything he said was gold and everyone followed him. He's not that guy anymore. He's coming into these places that they know him. Maybe he worked there before, and he's loud and he's dirty and he stinks and he is just in terrible shape. And the people who run the place say, Bill, you got to go. You can't come in here and do this. We don't want to get you arrested. So just please leave. That's the fair-haired boy. How do you think his ego is dealing with all of these things that's going on around him? Next paragraph. Let's highlight the first line here. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. A luxury is something that's excessive, right? Necessity is something that's required. So he's moving deep into stage 2, which is drinking to function. He's no longer a heavy drinker. He's now a real alcoholic. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I'd pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. How's that for selfish, right? He manages to scrape together a few bucks, And you'd think he'd go home and say, here, Lois, buy some groceries, or maybe shop for some groceries, or here, Lois, kick this into the phone bill, or kick this into the rent. But what's his priority? He's got to keep that tap flowing at the deli. See, he has to keep his bar tab open. If he doesn't pay him, he can't continue to charge. So his priorities are pay the bar tab, forget about the rent. That'll get taken care of somewhere, some other way. Continuing, this went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. And please underline shaking violently. A tumbler of gin, followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required. And what I like to do is highlight musts in green. So you may want to circle that or underline that in green. What I usually use is green for musts, pink for promises and prayers, orange for recovered references, and blue for approached references. And the reason why I make a point of that is so that if you want to go looking through the book, say for the musts that everyone says there are none in this book, there are tons of them. We've now on our list got about, I think, 146 of them. But be that as it may, if you want to find the musts, just thumb through the book and look for the green highlights. Same thing for promises and prayers. Thumb through the book and look for the pink highlights. It's a much easier way to find things than go page by page by page by page and reading everything. But it's up to you. It's your truth. Okay. Shaking violently. A tumble full of gin followed by half a dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Hell, that was breakfast as far as I'm concerned. Nevertheless, you may want to highlight this sentence, this phrase, nevertheless, I still thought I can control the situation. It's a great example of what Dr. Silkworth said, that at some point we can no longer differentiate the true from the false. Here it is. This is an example of Bill's doom curve. He's going deeper and deeper into his alcoholism, and he still thinks he can control it. And there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So he thinks he can control it now, right? Let's see how control worked for Bill this time. You may want to highlight this whole next paragraph, 3 lines of it. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Let's slow that down a bit. Lois's mother died. Lois's father defaulted on his mortgage after his wife died. But part of President Roosevelt's New Deal was a mortgage moratorium, which forbade banks from disclosing and putting you out of your home as long as you were able to pay a small monthly fee that was established by the bank. As long as you paid that small fee, they couldn't put you out. They couldn't take your home and put you in the street. And that's the situation we had here. But when Lois's mother died, shortly thereafter, her father remarried and moved out of the house. So now that the monthly fee has to be paid by Bill and Lois. This also says that Lois got ill. Lois had 3 ectopic pregnancies. Any one of them could have killed her. She had 3 of them. And in the 3 episodes, you want to know how many times Bill visited her in the hospital? Once. 1 time. 3 serious incidents where she could have died, and he shows up once. Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. Okay, and that's what we're talking about in terms of what's going on in this paragraph. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point of 1932, and I somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously, and there's his use of hyperbole, just excessive use of words when other words would fit better. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. This is the Jersey Lightning story.
Org.
Bill Wilson was first and foremost an alcoholic in recovery. He was a stinking, rotten drunk who by some divine grace was granted sobriety, was empowered to bring to the world this fellowship, this message. But I think like any gift of this magnitude, simply to protect him, he was not granted the full knowledge of what the price would be.
He was spellbinding on his own story anytime I ever heard him. And I think everybody else had that same sense. Because I think what people realized they were listening to was the founding myth, I guess would be, it's not myth, it's reality, simply a story of a founding, and that's what this was. And it was endlessly wanted and effective.
Some of you people may ask, why do these drunks continue to drink in the face of certain destruction? Why can't they stop? Well, this story will illustrate. One day I was sitting in a brokerage shop, and I fell into a conversation with a man who proved to be an heir to a great fortune. And I began my sales talk on how cheap securities were, how a syndicate ought to be put together to gather these things up. And he fell in with the idea. And I was to be the manager. Moreover, I was to have a third interest. Well, by the time we got that far in the conversations, they discovered about my drinking. So they came to me and they said, look, Bill, we know you got a real liquor problem. Wouldn't you be willing during the life of this thing to sign an agreement that you will not drink? That if you do drink, your interest in it will be ended. You know, the curious thing is, I really believed that I could stay sober when the incentive was so great. The work began, money came in, we began to buy securities, but now see what happened. One day, some old business acquaintances called me up. They said, Bill, we hear you're sober. They said, well, won't you go over in Jersey and do a piece of work for us? I said, sure. That evening, we put up at a small hotel, and one of the boys brings out a jug. I said, well, what you got there? Why, they say that's Applejack, Jersey Lightning. No, thanks. No, I'm not drinking. I can't handle it. They fall to playing cards. Every now and then the jug comes my way. With ease, I say, no thanks, because I can see my name on that contract. So quite easily I say no, until about 10:30 perhaps. Something occurred within me, and if that could be ever fully explained, we would completely comprehend the mystery of this obsession of drinking. Why, Bill Wilson, in all your drinking, in Europe and since, never in all your life have you had any Applejack. Not one single drink of Jersey Lightning. And that idea began to take hold and possess me. So that when that jug was passed to me, a curtain had fallen between me and reality. So I said, thanks very much. I will have one little shot this time. It couldn't hurt me at all. I lay in that hotel drunk for 3 days. That, I submit, is not the habit of drinking. That is the obsession of drinking. That obsession that has condemned people like us, time out of mind, to insanity and death.
You know,
We'll come back to some other excerpts from that video. I don't know if you noticed, I mentioned this last week, and those of you who were not there here, I apologize. I mentioned that when Bill passed away, there were 3 people in the hospital room with him. There was Lois, there was Bill's mistress, Helen Wynn, and there was Shep. Shep is Helen Wynn's son. Now, I think Shep was the first person you saw. He was the one guy who was speaking who was kind of in a shadow. But if you look at his features and listen to the way he talks, he looks a lot like and sounds a lot like Bill Wilson. So one of the things that this video kind of hints at is that could be Bill's son. Just a thought. Next time you watch it, take a look at that guy, Shep. It's not the Shep Cornell who rescued Ebby that day in New Hampshire. This is a totally different Shep. This was Helen's son. Okay, let's get back to some reality here. Okay, we're on page 5. Paragraph 3 just finished when he said, I went on a prodigious bender and hadn't a chance, vanished. There's your Jersey Lightning story. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. I'm going to suggest you highlight those 2 sentences because it sounds to me like Bill is having a moment of clarity. For the first time, at least that we know of, Bill can differentiate the false from the truth. If he's saying that I recognize it's the first one that gets me. Remember in the film, he said, well, one couldn't hurt. Of course, we all say that. And 3 days later, he comes up out of a blackout. But now he realizes the problem is indeed not the 10th or the 12th, the first drink. I was through forever. Bill is a moment of clarity. Mazel tov. Terrific. Before then, I'd written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business. And so I did. So he trotted out his willpower. He said, come on, Will, let's do this. So Bill is now going to try another form of recovery before, well, I'll mention that later. Now he's going to work on self-will. Self-will will take care of it. Shortly afterwards, I came home drunk. You may want to highlight that. There had been no fight, no defense. So shortly after declaring he was done forever, he came home drunk again, and there was no defense. We are without defense against the first drink, and that's what he has learned. Where had been my high resolve? And high resolve is just willpower. Where's my high resolve? Where's my willpower? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. And let's highlight the rest of this paragraph. Was I crazy? I began to wonder. For such, and I've underlined this, an appalling lack of perspective, That's a real good definition of insanity to me. An appalling lack of perspective. Lack of perspective basically just means inability to recognize the truth. How can such an appalling lack of perspective seem near being just that? Renewing my resolve. Okay, here we go again. Renewing my willpower. I tried again. Can anyone identify with that? These are the kind of things that I mean about putting check marks next to it. How often did we do that? Swear to do it. That's it. Never again. Never. The next day we find ourselves drunk again. I tried again. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksuredness. And I've underlined cocksuredness in red because it's, to me, it's an indication of his, again, his overconfidence, ego. There's still left of some ego left in this guy. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time, please underline that, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. How it happened. Well, let's look at how it happened. What happened? Well, first of all, he walks in to, quote, use the phone, right? Probably not the best idea in the world. Because once he walked into that bar, you know that mental obsession started to talk to him, started convincing him of a lie. Take that drink. Take that drink. It's just one drink. Take that drink. That one drink can't hurt. You heard what he said before, that a curtain had fallen between him and the truth. Take that drink. So he has that one drink. And then what happens? The physical allergy kicks in. The craving takes over. And now he's drinking because he has to. What happens? He ends up drinking against his will. So when he asks that question, how did it happen? Let's look at those facts. And I put a big check mark next to it. Has anyone here ever drank against their will? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Nobody had to tie me down either. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then. And so I did. I've underlined that last part, and so I did. And I did. Next paragraph, I'm going to suggest you highlight the first 4 lines. The remorse, and let's underline that. Horror, let's underline that. And hopelessness, let's underline that. Of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably. Please underline that. And there was, and please underline, a terrible sense of impending calamity. Bill is jonesing. For those of you who may not be familiar, jonesing is more of a street term, a drug term. He's going through withdrawal. That's what jonesing is. And next to it, in the margin, I'm going to suggest you write mourning, terror, and madness. And I'll explain why before the end of the page. But this section we just read, this description, this beautiful description of a spiritual malady, this beautiful description of the 4 horsemen coming to pay him a visit, is mourning, terror, and madness. I hardly dared cross the street, lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck. So look at how Bill has regressed. Now he's like a child. He can't even cross the street with any confidence. That's how low he sunk. He doesn't, the guy who had all of this ego, the world is just waiting for me. I'd show them, everyone following me to the tune of paper millions. This guy no longer has the confidence to even cross the street without somebody taking him. He's a child. He's regressed to that point. At least I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. So he's got what? 2 6-packs. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. And I put a question mark after that, because I don't care how much I drank and how many drugs I took. I don't think I could ever really say that my nerves were really calmed down. I might have said they were, but they were not, because I kept going and going and going. That obsession, that craving prevented me from ever being still. My nerves would never be still. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Please, above that, write the problem, just like we did a few pages back. On the previous page where it said abruptly in October 1929, we wrote the problem. At the end of the paragraph, remember, it said some people were jumping out of windows. He wouldn't. It disgusted me. I wouldn't jump. I went back to the bar. So in this case, his solution was the bar. So October 29, problem is a crash in the stock market. Solution, go back to the bar. And remember, he said, as I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. Tomorrow is another day. Liquid courage, right? That's what happened in that problem. Watch what happens in this problem. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. The problem. Well, so had I. And please highlight and underline, the market would recover, but I wouldn't. That shows just how hopeless he's become. Previously, when the market crashed, his ego combined with alcohol, that old fierce determination came back. Not now. Now, no amount of alcohol could fix Bill Wilson now. First crisis, yeah. Second crisis, crash of the market. Nope, nothing. No amount of alcohol is going to change that for Bill. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Right? Last time he said that when people were jumping out of the window, remember what he said? It disgusted me. Now he's just saying, not now. He's not totally eliminating the possibility. Not now. Then a mental fog settled down. That alcoholic depression. I put a big check mark next to it because of that. Can anyone here identify with that alcoholic depression? It's amazing to me how many people, when they tell their story, are on the verge of suicide when they come in here. It's extraordinary. And that's what we're talking about, this alcoholic depression that sinks in, where we begin to think that taking our own life is a viable solution to this problem, because nothing else is helping. So let's continue. Not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion. Please highlight, underline, and maybe even circle that last word, because now he's in that third category. He's not drinking for fun anymore. He's not drinking to function. It's when he said it became a necessity, he's past that. He's in that last category. And boy, could I understand. Can I relate to that? Because in the end, for me, that was it. I couldn't function. I was not having any fun. It was just me and the bottle and a needle and a spoon. And that was it. All I wanted to do was get as far away and as deep inside as possible. I had to get away from you. And the worst thing was I had to get away from me even more. Continuing. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms. For mine endured this agony 2 more years. And I've underlined 2 more years. And the agony he's talking about, incidentally, see above, see paragraph 1 and 2. That's the agony he's talking about. And those 2 more years, incidentally, were 1930 to 31, 32, somewhere in that area. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse. Please underline slender. And when I first read this, I thought he's just describing her purse. I've since thought about the fact that he's not really describing the purse. He's describing the contents of the purse, that there's nothing really in her purse. A slender purse means its contents are meager, right? As opposed to it's thick with cash. It's slender. There ain't much cash in there. So what does he do? He steals it when, and highlight this, please, the morning terror and madness were on me. There's the morning terror and madness. You may want to write see above, but that's what we're talking about in that previous paragraph. The remorse, the horror, the hopelessness, unforgettable. My brain raced uncontrollably. That terrible sense of calamity. If you want, let's jump over to page 161 for a minute. Let's keep our place where we are here. But 161 or 151, I'm sorry. Yes, 151, I'm sorry. Page 151, paragraph 1, the last 2 or 3 lines. 4 horsemen visited him: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Oblivion followed by the awful awakening to face those 4 horsemen, to face the terror, the bewilderment, the frustration, despair. And going back to page 6, we can add remorse, horror, brain racing uncontrollably with a terrible sense of calamity and doom. Man, could I just, every time I read that, it still gives me chills. Still gives me chills. Thanks, Rob. That's good. Thanks for putting that up. So we're back to page 6. He says, when the morning madness were on me, you know, in the 2 lines before this, he says that that the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, that he's endured this 2 years. What is the this? It's the previous paragraph. And the point I'm trying to make is people say we have no willpower. Can you survive that? The people who say we're weak and have no willpower, can they do that? I had a $200 a day habit between alcohol and drugs, and I maintained it for 3 years without a job. Can you do that? Don't say I'm weak. Don't say I'm not resourceful. You try doing that. Maintain a $200-300 a day habit without a job. We're not weak. Okay, again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. It's an interesting word, weakling. He's harshly and ignorantly judging himself to be weak and morally deficient. He's judging himself, again, unfairly and ignorantly, to be a bad person. He still doesn't know what's wrong with him. Can you identify with that? Hell yeah. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Next to that, I've just written geographical cures. I'm just checking a note here. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture, craving, and obsession were so hellish, I feared I'd burst through my window, sash and all. Sash and all. That's the framework of the window. So he's not just going through the curtains, he's taking it all with him. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly jump. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Please underline heavy sedative. Next day, incidentally, that doctor is Dr. Leonard Strong, Strong. Dr. Strong was Bill's brother-in-law. He was married to Bill's sister. So he came with that heavy sedative. Next day, found me, please underline, drinking both gin and sedative. Here's a line that I missed the significance of for 20 some odd years. He says, this combination landed me on the rocks. Landing him on the rocks, he bottomed out. How did Bill bottom out? Alcohol and drugs, gin and sedative. If you've read Dr. Bob's story, he talks about a 17-year addiction to goofballs. Every day he survived on barbiturates and at night alcohol. And I mention that because if anyone here started a meeting and only alcoholics were allowed in, our founders would be denied entry. So anytime someone mentions drugs at a meeting, let's remember that our founders bottomed out when they were taking alcohol and drugs. Bill didn't bottom out before drugs. He bottomed out when he added drugs to the menu. And Dr. Bob always had it on the menu. So maybe I'm making too hard of a point here, but it always irritates me when people do that. Mention drugs. We're not supposed to mention drugs at a meeting. Well, the book mentions it. So people feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking. I was 40 pounds underweight. In other words, Bill is dying of malnutrition. I'm sure everyone here has seen, you have mental pictures of Bill Wilson. We just showed him walking through the woods. Bill was at his best, a skinny guy, tall, skinny, lanky. And if you're skinny and you're not consuming food, if all you're doing is drinking alcohol and taking pills, and you're 40 pounds underweight, you're dying. And that's what Bill is at, where Bill is at, where we leave him tonight. And we'll pick it up next week But where we leave our hero is on death's door from malnutrition.